So the name of this little fireside chat is Strengthening Community Through the Supply Chain. And you're probably wondering, what does that have to do with all of this? But you heard Milco speak earlier today about industrial outdoor storage, how that is so important in terms of helping with the supply chain. It's critical. But I want to introduce to you this incredible man, Todd Ziegler, who I had the pleasure of meeting recently and was just so compelled by what he is doing, which does affect the supply chain and ultimately affects our bottom line dollars on what we spend with consumer goods. But I'm going to let him take it away from here to explain to you about fintech, but on a whole nother level. Here you go. Take it away, Todd.
Thanks, Lynn, and thank you for the invite. I certainly appreciate being here. My name's Todd Ziegler. I'm the CEO of TruckCoinSwap. We're a fintech company. We're integrating blockchain and digital assets to solve a major problem in supply chain, specifically related to receivable settlement. So we've talked a lot here today about security issues, and I want to throw a fact out that most people don't know, and it's a shocking fact. On any given day in the United States of America, 90% of the full truckload spot freight is managed by approximately 1 million small businesses. You know, we go down the highway, we see the big carriers, J.B. Hunt, Werner, but all of those trucks are already spoken for. That's all contracted capacity. So literally 90% of the spot freight that's moving in the country today is moving with approximately 1 million small businesses. These are companies between 1 and 6 trucks. So another way to put that is, if those trucks stopped running today, every grocery store and every retailer in the country would be rationing goods within about a week. And we got a little window into that problem during COVID, when, you know, toilet paper was being rationed, and, you know, we couldn't find a lot of the things that, you know, we've just come to rely on in terms of, you know, CPG products and things along those lines. And the real problem in the industry, though, for these small businesses is cost. Okay, they're not at scale. They cannot payroll a settlement department. And this is a very fragmented industry. Again, you have, you know, 1 million small businesses managing all this freight in North America every day. So a couple decades ago, as the industry kind of started to become more fragmented, we saw banks and factoring companies come into the space because these shippers, and I try not to name names, but it's almost like in the freight industry, in the transportation industry, the larger the shipper, the worse their pay terms. I mean, I can name a number of Fortune 100 companies that you've all heard of, and their pay terms are between net 90 and net 180. Okay, these small businesses can't wait 30 days to get paid. They can't wait a week to get paid. It's $1,200 in diesel to fill up a rig. They need to get to liquidity now. So these banks and factoring companies stepped into the void and said, hey, we'll advance you cash. We'll get you to liquidity in 5 to 10 business days. But we're going to charge you 3% of gross on every receivable. 3% doesn't sound that bad. But annualized over term, it's a 20 to 25% interest rate. So these transportation companies are effectively paying payday loan rates to get their cash, and that affects all of us because when we walk into the grocery store today, the cost of everything is going up. I mean, I just went to buy orange juice. It was $4.50. That's not just due to inflation. That's also due to all of these inflated costs in the supply chain that every single one of us are subsidizing. So, you know, I've been in the C-suite in the transportation industry, specifically in third-party logistics, for the better part of a decade. And I realized this was a problem. I was not an early adopter of blockchain or digital assets. I didn't make my first Bitcoin investment until, I think, 2017. But I knew that blockchain and digital assets were the way to solve this problem. And I was reading all these white papers coming out of MIT saying that disintermediating these types of problems in industry is the very best use case for blockchain and digital assets. And I thanked Dave for kind of breaking the ice a little bit on the blockchain conversation, because blockchain is not a solution to every problem, but where it is a solution, it's typically a tremendous solution. And that's where we are here. So after reading all these white papers coming out of MIT, I finally sat down and wrote what, in retrospect, was a really bad white paper. I took it to MIT, and I took it to the Advanced Blockchain Lab at the University of Wyoming. And a year later, we've now launched a digital asset on a top 10 U.S. exchange. We've launched our mobile and web apps, and we're formally launching to the transportation industry. I think it's like 1 week from today at the FreightWaves conference down in Chattanooga. So the solution is it is tremendous because it's a free solution to all of our potential transportation companies. It costs them nothing. And in the process, we're able to disintermediate a lot of this aggregate waste and cost that all of us are paying every time we go to buy anything. Because, you look around here today, I mean, everything in this room was once on a truck. And that's true of just about every product and service.
Just to step back a moment, does everybody here know what factoring is? Like, raise your hand if you don't know. No? Okay, yeah, right. So I didn't know what it was either until I spoke to Todd.
Yeah.
And then it was amazing. So it is that amount of money, correct me, right? But that people have to pay, the truckers have to pay during that time period when they are delivering the goods. The shipper is the store. I'm going to just say it, like i.e. a Walmart or an Amazon, whoever needs the goods transferred.
Right.
So they don't pay right away. They take 90 days to pay. And in those 90 days, this middle level of truck driver, how many there? 1 million? 1 million
in North America.
1 million truckers in that middle market in North America, who also use his facilities to park. They can't cover those costs. So the banks come in and they cover the cost for a fee. And that fee is a very high fee. And you were saying to me, like, if the payment is $10,000, $400 goes to the bank. Is that correct?
Typically, yeah, it's 3% of gross. So just to break it down on a very granular level, for an owner-operator who's moving 3 loads a week, that's 150 loads a year. If that owner-operator is financing his receivables or factoring his commercial paper, he or she is going to pay somewhere between $20,000 and $40,000 a year of their net revenue for that service. So I think in Alabama right now, the average salary for an owner-operator is about $41,000. If that driver is able to recapture $40,000 in net revenue in 2023, they've just increased their salary by 100% and simultaneously reduced the cost, the aggregate costs in the supply chain that all of us are paying on whatever that carrier is moving.
Right. And so then TruckCoinSwap, how does that work and how does that reduce the cost?
Sure. So we offer the service free to our carriers. There's no cost at all associated for them. We just changed the current model. We added one step. Instead of having their cash advanced to them in an ACH payment into their business checking account, when we fund them, we give them the current USD value of our Polygon token at the time we fund them. So basically, we directly deposit those digital assets into their wallet at Coinbase, Kraken, FTX, wherever it is that they have a wallet. They can then immediately sell those tokens to get back to liquidity, to get to US dollars, or if they have a crypto debit card, if they're with FTX or Coinbase, they can actually spend those digital assets directly off their debit card at a truck stop, filling up the rig, or whatever their operating costs are. So they can get to liquidity quicker at a much lower cost. And then if the shipper is Walmart and Walmart's pay terms are net 90, we then have collection rights in that receivable. And instead of Walmart sending the money to the carrier, Walmart sends that money to TruckCoinSwap. So that's how we're profitable, they're profitable, and we're reducing all of these aggregate costs in the supply chain.
And I think it's fascinating. And then Milco, bring you into this dialogue for a moment. How do you see working with the truck drivers? Because you have a lot of clients. Your tenants at the industrial outdoor storage facilities, a lot of them are truckers. Are you seeing any issues with them on the payment of covering those costs? How does that work on your end?
Yes. So for starters, we really get into that when we're vetting tenants to see if they're, able to pay rent every month. And, like Todd was saying, most of these are, small business owners. They have about, say 3 to 6, trucks and tractors in their fleet. And most of these people do need factoring to help them out and make ends meet, and most of those don't end up making great tenants because it's not very likely that if something bad were to happen in the economy that they could survive. So I do see how this TruckCoinSwap can come into play. It would definitely be very helpful. I know for a project we just closed, we looked at one of the tenants' financials, and the tenant we ended up signing had about 20 trucks in their fleet, and their financials looked miles better than someone who had about 7 in their fleet.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Wow.
Right, and in that situation, that's probably a carrier that was at scale and didn't have to factor their invoices, I would guess. Because it does create a collateralization and security issue as well. If you don't have, if somebody else has first rights in your receivables, right? I mean, it's just, as a small business, it's so much harder to just compete at scale and just cash flow. And again, to, that granular example of that single owner operator, if that owner operator is able to recapture $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year in net revenue, maybe he or she can add a second truck. Right. Maybe he or she can, make an investment in the business, or maybe they're more solvent, so they can sign a commercial lease, right? Yep. And have assets have access to real property assets. So it is a real game changer.
Right. So do you see this then increasing the trucking industry, because the average age of truckers today is 58 years old?
It is, and scarcity is a real problem in the industry right now. And, it's funny because there's a lot of conversation about autonomous trucking, and autonomous trucking represents a real potential problem for all of us, because if you look at the board of directors of all of the largest autonomous trucking organizations, at least in North America, sitting on all of those boards are the C-suiters from the largest trucking companies in the United States. So what that ultimately means is, if autonomous trucking, and I think we all agree autonomous wins the day over time, right? Tech usually always wins over time. That includes blockchain and digital assets. But if we have massive consolidation in the full truckload space, and instead of having 1 million small businesses helping us out with all the spot freight, you have all of this capacity concentrated in the top 5 or 10 carriers in the country, guess what happens at the grocery store? The costs of everything continue to go up, right? So these, and these are the same carriers that saved all of us during COVID. They are arguably a national security interest, and they've just been getting raked over the coals for decades by not being at scale and having to use these banking and factoring solutions. But we do hope that that era is ending, and we've just created a solution that the industry desperately needs.
How much time did you say we had with the grocery stores if it all came to an end?
About 7 days if these trucks stopped running. We would literally be rationing product in a week. So they are vital, not just to the supply chain, but to the entire American economy.
So on that note, you want to talk about what you're looking for your company investment-wise? I mean, you're here. Hopefully there's some investors here who will be interested in learning about Todd and TruckCoinSwap to help this company grow and really scale, because this is really important.
Sure. Well, the company's based in Wyoming. The entire dev team is out in Wyoming. I live just north of Cincinnati. I'm the transportation guy in the group, right? And we are formally launching to the transportation industry next week. And we're not actively out soliciting funding per se, but I would ask everybody, tell people that you heard about TruckCoinSwap. Tell people that you heard about this solution that's being created in the supply chain, and we hope that people will vote with their wallets, right? Because if this is a solution, if the use case is correct and the thesis is correct, and based on all the carriers that I've talked to, I can tell you that it is. I've yet to talk to a carrier, or really any party in the supply chain, that likes their factoring company. Maybe you have. But these banks and factoring companies are universally hated. And ultimately, if the solution is as successful as we believe and we're able to capture market share at the pace that we believe we'll be able to capture it at, everybody's milk and eggs over time will get a little bit cheaper, and that's really a good thing for everybody, especially in this era of rampant inflation.
Milco, do you think you'll be using TruckCoinSwap for payment by your truckers as tenants?
I think there's a very good chance we actually do bring that up. As an example of this, we actually, so the tenant we ended up signing to that property, they weren't a national carrier per se. They were just a little bit, larger family-owned company. And they kept trying to hand me checks the first of every month. And I told him, hey, there's this thing called ACH payments where you just set it up with your bank and it goes out automatically. And this was sort of new to them, but, I helped them through that process, and it was actually very, very helpful to them because, on these small businesses, the owners are actually, they actually might still be driving trucks and, operating on a day-to-day basis, and they don't really have, the time or the energy to have to go deal with a factoring company or something like that. So I definitely see a great use for it. And, while the adoption there might be a little bit of friction there, I think the long-term benefit over time to these small companies is definitely very significant.
And I do want to add a little bit of scope to this. So we talked about, 1 million small businesses. Collectively, these folks are doing $500 billion a year in commercial paper transactions. Okay, so this is a very big sandbox, and we ultimately, even though that's kind of the niche within the niche, that's where the narrative is, that's where the focus is, that's where the pain point is. Ultimately, there's going to be a lot of other companies, like the company that you were just referring to, that may not be factoring their receivables right now, but maybe they've got a shipper that pays on net 90, net 120, net 180 terms. If they can monetize that receivable in 3 to 5 days with TruckCoinSwap at no cost, why would they be waiting 120 days for the shipper to pay them? So we actually do believe in terms of, scale and opportunity that not only can, the solution scale to all modes of transportation, but, factoring isn't just an issue in the transportation industry. It's an issue in a multitude of industries. So we do hope to see, good adoption over time.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Adam. You want to repeat it?
Yeah, the question was basically on adoption. How do we get carriers, actors, parties in industry to adopt? And that's a great question. Very interestingly, a lot of our users are driving 8 hours a day, right? And they're listening to Sirius XM radio. You'd be surprised. It's something like 45% of the carriers that we've talked to and the carriers that are involved with our beta at least have a wallet at Coinbase or Kraken or FTX because they heard all of these ads, especially during COVID when, crypto was going wild. And I know we're kind of in a reset or in a bear market, but we've seen this before, right? So actually, there's a great understanding there of how to buy digital assets. So this really just adds one step to the process in terms of selling to get back to liquidity. The value proposition, though, is tremendous because if you owned a 10-truck operation and I could save you $20,000 to $30,000 a year in net revenue per truck, okay, which is $200,000 to $300,000 a year for you, if you could just do the same thing that you're doing now, but instead of settling those receivables inside of your Wells Fargo business checking account, you're going to settle those receivables inside of your Coinbase wallet. Okay, the value proposition there is pretty strong for you to do so. And the support that we've gotten from the transportation industry thus far has been amazing. FreightWaves just wrote a great article about us 4 weeks ago, and it's their conference that we're at next week, so we're excited about it.
That was great. That really summed it up. I really appreciate it. So everybody, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and please feel free to go up to Todd and ask him any more questions. So thank you. We're going to take that break. This was amazing. Thank you so much to TruckCoinSwap. Okay.